welcome into Radioactive Paper Cuts. I am your host, Josh Kennedy. Today we're going to be doing another Radioactive review, and we're starting our reviews on the season 2 of The Witcher. And I decided that instead of trying to do the entire season at once, I'm going to give every episode a little bit more love than you would have got in a one episode offshoot. We're going to do episodes 1 and 2 today. 3 and 4 are going to drop on Thursday, and then 5, 6 will be next Tuesday. 7, 8 will be the following Thursday. So all episodes will be out by the end of the year, so they should still be relevant, but I thought that was the best way to do it. So hopefully the audience is on board. Joining me today is my loyal Marvel Stuff co-host, Coach. How are you doing today?
Hey, that's me there. I'm excited. A lot of Marvel news going on, but in some ways, this was just as big in my world, so I'm excited about it.
Fantastic. And making her debut on any of my podcasts, my good friend, Rachel Dodd. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, and same here. This has been pretty big in my world, The Witcher Season 2 coming out.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I never could have guessed that the overall impact this was going to have on people. And like Cody said, this is the same week as the new Spider-Man movie came out, and I still see Witcher headlines popping up. Not quite as much as Spider-Man, but pretty close. I mean, people are excited about this show. So let's hop in. Just overall, what do we think right off the top so far? We're going to do the first couple episodes here, but I just want to know what you guys think.
Yeah, the world building is just as good as season 1. It's nice that the storyline is going to be a more straightforward, coherent one. I like that they are able to do what they did last season, which is like side missions while they tell the larger narrative. And of course, the 3 characters seem pretty legit early on. So far, so good. I've watched a little more than the first 2 episodes, but focus just on those 2. Feeling A+ right now.
Good point there, Coach. I personally am only going to watch the 2 episodes that we cover before every episode, and I perfectly accept that both of you are not going to do that, and I do not care. I'm just saying that is how I'm going to handle it. So, Rachel, what is your opinion on this season so far, and what are we looking forward to?
I think that the biggest thing I've noticed from the first 2 episodes is that they're keeping with the same main trope of being very female-centric, keeping a lot of the focus on our strong female characters. We've got Tissaia, we have Yennefer and Ciri and Fringilla, which it's really nice to see a lot more focus on Fringilla because we didn't get to see too much of her in season 1. So first 2 episodes, I think they've, given us a really good show of that.
Yeah, Fringilla was definitely painted more of like a villain, and she still seems to be kind of a villain role, but also an unlikely friend in the scenario they find themselves in, and we will definitely talk about the current situation they are in here shortly. But let's hop right in. We don't need to do the whole episode of chronological order, but I think we might as well talk about the open. We get to see a monster attack in a village that we don't know until the second episode, but it is revealed to be the village of Kaer Morhen, correct? I'm on board here. You guys are the big fans, so I want to make sure I'm clearing things up.
In the first episode?
Yes, the very beginning.
Is
that village or is it a different village?
No, Kaer Morhen is the castle they end up in.
Yeah, okay. So it's in the same region, like a small town in the same region. I don't think they named the town. Yeah.
Okay. And they were attacked by the monster that was later revealed in episode 2, the Bruxa. So that was a fun little intro. I think it was mostly just to kind of get the audience hype for lots of monsters in this new season. Were you guys on board for this type of open, or would you rather just jump right into the characters?
Yeah, I'm super about it. I am all about Geralt getting to be Geralt. Because Rachel said that she's right, that the show is very intentionally female focused, which is interesting considering obviously the titular character is a male. But so it's cool when he gets to do his cool action things, and it sets them up to get to do a lot more of the emotional growth things. So it kind of gets the best of both worlds when you kick it off with a little bit of action. And they did plenty of blood and plenty of action in the first season, and they're sticking right to it. So I love it.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of that, I think that the writing perspective, I think that when they started off season 2 with the monster, they made a really good tie-in back to season 1 which also started off with a monster. I forget the name of the Kikimora. Maybe that was the monster. It was the spider in the swamp kind of looking creature.
Yes, it was a Kikimora.
And I think that's a really good homage to season 1, and it keeps us that same trope. I think they're re-emphasizing the coherence, which I know that was probably the main complaint from season 1, was kind of the timeline jumping that confused a lot of people. So I think it was a good move on the writer's part for a monster in season or episode 1.
Yeah, Coach and I touched on that just a little bit, and how we were expecting that to be the case for season 2 in our season 1 overview. Rachel, I think you and I are going to do an episode just at the end of season 2 and all the things you love about Witcher, because I know you super want to nerd out outside of just talking about the current episodes. So I will give you that opportunity, but we get introduced to the Witcher and Ciri, and they go to the Battle of Sodden Hill, and this is kind of, we're introduced. I mean, I guess we see Tissaia first, right? She's going to these bodies, and she's using a power that we haven't seen yet, correct? She kind of can see how the person died. What did we think of that power? And is it something that's correct to the, I guess, books or video games?
Yes, to both. It's featured often especially in Witcher 3, there's a whole set of missions. It's kind of how they find Ciri themselves, is by tracking of different dead bodies and learning their stories as you go. And so it's definitely something these witches can do. Chaos magic can do a lot of very cool, very powerful things. So it's fun that they get to show off that mages are really, really the power of this society, which is why such a small number of them are able to have such influence in the country. So they have power. It's sweet. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I think that what we see right after Tissaia, when we cut to the scene at Aretuza and seeing the rest of the mages, that even though Tissaia has that ability to wield this power, it's still something that is a power in question, which, again, tying that in with the female-centric trope, a lot of what the women do inside of the world of The Witcher is constantly questioned, not just by the men, but the women around these powerful women. And I think it was really great to see episode 1 start off in that way.
I also just want to hit on just the idea that it's really focusing on how much Tissaia cares about Yennefer, which is one of the more powerful things that they did in season 1. That's not necessarily like super reflective of the other source material, but I like the decision. I like the creative decision, and they are hammering it in, and it seems to be an important part of what they want. So I think
I got a little bit of it, almost a Snape and Harry vibe, where they start out as adversaries, but then Snape ends up sacrificing himself to protect Harry and all that good stuff later on in the movie.
Can I just add on one little thing? I don't know if either of you picked up on this, but I thought it was really interesting that when Tissaia was about to do, I forget what the actual spell or the force that she's using on what's his name, Nimir,
the prisoner.
The man that the Dark Knight, the Black Knight.
I think they call
that they have captured. The Black Knight. How she basically said something to him. She said something to the effect like, I'm sorry, I'm misquoting it, but I'm not a bad person, or I don't consider myself to be a bad person or a mean person. I'm like, Tissaia, you were so mean to Yennefer. Let's just take 2 steps back there, honey. We need to just, I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting, because maybe that is her own perspective on herself, that in this world of The Witcher, when there are so many other much more crueler people out there, that she's not the worst of them. So in that effect, her doing this magic on a living person, going into the depths of their mental and soul part of their body, isn't as bad as things can get. Maybe that's her perspective. I don't know, but I just thought it was interesting.
I mean, yeah, definitely a good point that normally people, the jerks or the bitches or the mean people, the villains, whatever you want to say, they rarely view themselves that way. So I think Tissaia is definitely more of I think she's going to be developed as more of a hero in this season, more than she was in season 1. Because at the end of season 1, it was kind of clear that she was on the same side as Yennefer, which is awesome. But the first 5-6 episodes, she was kind of the worst. So I am
Mm-hmm.
excited
Mm-hmm.
to see her character growth as well, because she's not one of the main three,
Same.
but she's an important side character, no doubt about that. Now, when Geralt and Ciri bring themselves to the battle here in search of Yennefer at the same time, and they cross paths with the Seiya, what did we think of that whole interaction there? Like I guess the power dynamic, and they both have unique relationships with Yennefer. So I was just curious what you guys thought of that.
It's just sad, man. Just sads me out. And obviously, as the audience, we just want to see the big three come together. We want to see
Right.
Ciri, Geralt, and Yennefer together.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing but it's not happening. And it's just sad for Geralt to have to like accept it. As much as they're not together, they're still connected. And to him, she's not. For all he knows, she's gone. So it's important that he gets that note, but it just sucks as the audience to have to see him be sad.
Yeah.
Rachel.
Yeah. Well, I think my my train of thought here for, I guess, probably the remainder of this episode here is going to be again on the emphasis of the female trope that we see. I think Tissaia knows that she's like this really big female influence and like leader in Yennefer's life, and all of a sudden Geralt just walks in. Clearly, Tissaia is a smart enough woman and well versed in chaos and magic enough to know that like Geralt is a witcher. Geralt, is a powerful being himself outside of being a witcher, but he's a man nonetheless. And him coming in, she might feel a little bit of a interjection, because women, we're I'm a girl, so I feel like I can speak a little bit on
you
behalf of
feel
other
free
women.
to give us the female perspective, because
we're defensive, if a man comes in, we're kind of like, okay, who are you? I think Tissaia did a little bit of that up and down, the body check type of thing, where it's like, I don't know who you are, I don't know who you think you are, like I'm going through my own emotional thing. I just lost Yennefer. Who do you think you are? And I think they handled that scene really well, but I think it was also another inside look on Tissaia and Geralt could have talked more. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They could have talked more, but Tissaia didn't push further, and neither did Geralt. Geralt just turned around and, was dealing with the immediacy of the news. But Tissaia continues to look for Yennefer, which I think is interesting how Tissaia is the one still pursuing Yennefer, and yet Geralt is not actively seeking out Yennefer. He is, I guess, kind of accepting that she's gone based off Tissaia's word.
Really.
So
Well,
yeah,
I
so I think that's interesting.
Guys take that
Yeah.
approach very differently when there's a new guy that comes in the room like, so can I beat him in a fight? That's essentially the guy perspective on it all. Like, oh, so can I take this guy? That's kind of the vibe guys are forced to kind of measure up the other guy. But I had a little fun notation on this interaction, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. You both also watch Game of Thrones, and I'm curious if this is going to be like an interaction similar to like a Bran and Tyrion. So they cross paths maybe once or twice, but they're, for the most part, their stories are completely unrelated. Is that kind of what we think is going to happen here? Or is it going to turn into more of like they join forces toward a certain goal? I'm just curious what you guys think. And we're going to speculate, because why not? This is my podcast.
I don't want to give anything away that's too much of like obviously the source material of the book or the game. But in general, the show is giving off the vibe that Geralt has a singular mission, and that is in Ciri, whereas the mages have a more broad political, warlike story that they're going on. So any sort of crossing a path probably wouldn't be Geralt, joining their forces so much as just if by happenstance it is what benefits Ciri, then that's great, and if not, that's great. It's kind of what it seems like the show wants to let us know.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board for that. I just thought it would be fun to kind of talk about that for a second here, just to relate it to some other source material. And I love this because I don't know too much about this topic, and I got a couple experts on here, so I get to pick brains without having to dive deep into these books quite yet. I will, I think, eventually read the books and play the games. But
I do like it that you pointed out, a lot of the intrigue of Game of Thrones, we don't like to admit it, but a lot of the intrigue of it is the political masterminding and which countries are going to take over which countries and who's going to team up and all that kind of stuff. And so I like that season 2 of The Witcher wants to dive into that, because that is it's an intriguing part of the source material, even if it's not really a through line that is as focused on as it is in the Game of Thrones books and show.
Thoughts on that, Rachel?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I love Game of Thrones, big fan. I think that there's a lot that probably the showrunner and the writers of the show have taken from Game of Thrones. I think that, obviously Game of Thrones is this, it's going to go down in history as, one of the classic shows. Like, we have all of our silver screen, films. Game of Thrones is that modern, age thing that's going to go down. So I think that our writers have taken a lot. So I think it's, yes, like we were talking about, the political scheme, the relational dynamics that seem to be very complex with, like lots of, drama and backstory and, like who slept with who and whatever. But then there's also like that overarching like world transitionary shift. Same thing like the White Walkers and the North and the South in Game of Thrones, and Daenerys crossing the ocean with the Dothraki and things like that to come and conquer Westeros or whatever. Like, I think that Game of Thrones has a very similar darkness and world transition that is just starting to happen in season 2. We've been getting all that build up from season 1, and then season 2 is where we're actually, I think, going to see the shift really, really, really happening.
Yeah, for the record, speaking of White Walkers, if you guys didn't catch the reference, it does happen in the first episode. I think it's also mentioned in the second episode. They do mention the Wild Hunt. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head. You haven't seen anything about it yet, but it's
same idea. Okay, that's pretty cool. I just wanted to draw the parallels there, because I mean, a lot of people have said like, oh, this is Netflix's answer to Game of Thrones. Not necessarily true, because the source material was also there, but I think they saw the success of Game of Thrones, realized they could capitalize on a different IP, and they've developed it into their own thing. So let's get back to this to episode 1 though. After they leave the battlefield, meaning Geralt and Ciri, they kind of go to like a camp out, and they don't necessarily have a direction in where they want to go. Now, is this typical of their characters? Is it just they didn't have a plan set ahead, or is it more just they needed time to kind of gather their thoughts after they came across this battlefield, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's obvious we know from episode 2 where they're headed. They're headed to Kaer Morhen.
The transition worked just fine, but I just thought it was interesting that they had like a conversation about where they're going to go in the woods, as opposed to just making that decision straight up. I was curious if that was like something that I'm missing from the source material. I mean, if that was just a writing
pretty
decision.
Typical of Geralt to not want to tell anybody anything. So I suppose that part's. I mean, he probably knows. I can't really remember this conversation too well, so I'm not gonna speculate too much on what was happening. But I do remember that they weren't going anywhere anytime fast. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was they considered going back to Centro, which obviously that wasn't a good option, and then she suggested another village. And
I do remember this conversation.
And then Geralt said if they go there, then they're gonna marry her off to the nearest prince with bad breath, or whatever the line is.
The Skelligs, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, obviously we know what happened. We watched the episode. So they go from the woods and they go towards Kaer Morhen. Like you said, I feel like I'm going to say it wrong 1,000,005 times, but that's okay. They find this village abandoned, which will remain nameless because apparently I'm an idiot and didn't know the name of it.
No, I don't know it either. Don't worry.
Okay, I'm not worried about it anymore. So there's no one guarding it. You can't hear the dogs bark. That's more storytelling, kind of just making it make sense. So he decides to go to his friend's house. And the friend whose name I have right here and can't seem to find. So someone else say it.
Nevelin. I don't know how to say it.
Nevelin or Nivelin?
I think it's Nivelin.
I think it's Nivelin, yeah.
Neville? No, I don't
it's
know.
Neville Longbottom. So Nivelin, played by the same guy. I didn't know this while I was watching it, but it's the same guy that played Tormund.
You didn't know that?
Game of Thrones. No, I didn't notice.
You didn't know he was going to be in the show. Oh, that's exciting that you didn't know that. Okay,
so happy
that's
when
cool.
I saw the casting on IMDb. I was like, oh, no way, let's go.
Yeah.
So his character, everyone and their mother knew that they immediately made the correlation to Beauty and the Beast. So are we kind
Mhm.
of on board with this? Is this kind of like a Grimm Brothers fairy tale type of deal? What do we
I
go
It's
would
for?
say yes.
fire.
Oh, it's
It's
awesome.
absolutely. So if you know the books, you know that they do this a few different times. There's multiple times that there's an adventure that Geralt goes on or talks about where he kind of has a Disney-like experience, but like obviously closer to the
Mhm.
Grimm's brother source material with a little bit of twist, so that way it fits the monsters that exist within the world of The Witcher and this idea of curses and things. So it's super cool. This is probably my favorite one. Ciri, I don't believe is there during in the book version of it. I think it's more of a story he tells. But as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, they're doing this story. Let's go. And they did it super well. I'll let you explain what happens, but
Yeah, I mean,
just the
Coach brought
setup's
up a
great.
good point when we were talking about how we're going to do this podcast, and I agree that every single episode is worth doing a podcast on, but I wanted to kind of stay relevant and to keep things moving because Netflix, again, I mentioned that they dropped the entire season as opposed to
Mhm.
doing the weekly releases that I was originally thinking it would be. So I thought it would be best to kind of give every episode their props, go over it this way. So yeah, we're in episode 1, and he gets entered. They go into the castle, and I love this character immediately. I was like, this guy is fire. He's so funny, and his magic tricks and stuff. It was great. Rachel, what is your opinion on this whole Beauty and the Beast esque story?
Oh, I mean, I love it, and I definitely think it's totally appropriate to say that the things that Geralt goes through are dark twists on Disney tropes. Definitely here, it's such a interesting parallel to Beauty and the Beast, and yet um, this beast is probably the very the beast in Disney. He's a prince. He's a decent person. Like when he's the beast and he's trying to become a more decent person, and you see that trope here, but we
Well,
understand that
yeah, the
when
initial
he's
crime was much more severe than what
that's
the
what yeah
Beast
that's what I was
did.
gonna say. Like um that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, exactly. Like the thing that we saw here is that what he did was far worse. It was like on the plane. It wasn't just like he scorned, like he was a bachelor and he's, in the Disney trope, he
He
scorned,
scorned the old hag or
avail.
whatever it was.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And yeah, I think that the dark twist uh, really brings it home that this man was obviously the figure of a beast, but
Hmm. He's
this
also
was very much human. Like the hypocrisy, the complexity, the worst of the worst, rape to do something like that to somebody, to like not only
to the
defile
high
a sacred
priestess.
temple.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Like not only defile a sacred temple, a sacred place of worship for people, but to go in and attack the heart of it. And we don't know how that happened. Like it could have been even worse. Like he could have like charmed her to fall in love with him and then he raped her. We don't know. Like, but he was cursed, obviously, like to a very extreme extent. And
Yeah, but this
yeah,
is one of those times where like you kind of don't feel bad for him in the end. At least I
no,
didn't
no,
personally.
nope,
And
mm-mm.
let's talk about the Bruxa though. Just that whole Verena is the name. Her being added into this story gave it another dimension. And
Mm-hmm.
one, obviously, we got to get monsters in here. It's The Witcher, so that made perfect sense to me. But her I don't know if I want to call it a relationship, but her interactions with Ciri were interesting, right? Kind of weird.
Yes. So the Bruxas are great. They're kind of the Witcher version of vampires, is essentially what their
Okay,
Yep.
existence is.
makes sense.
And this is a very interesting one. And the show hints on it a little bit, this idea that there were other women that he had tried to fall in love with before. Because,
Hmm.
classic, that's how you break the curse, of course. But obviously it didn't work. And in the books, it explains that like he's actually a very charming guy and women like to come by, but they always just sort of used him for his money and stuff. And it's actually pretty funny because in the books they very much enjoy the act of having sex with a beast is kind of like the
Oh,
thing
that's
that's happening.
interesting.
So I'm glad that the show didn't decide to go that direction. But the direction they do go, and this is directly drawing, is that obviously a Brooks, it kind of makes perfect sense this thing that needs to feast all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and a creature that can be feasted on all the time. So just by proximity of like
That's
the
a good
natural
point.
making
Mhm.
of like why they fit together, and then she stuck around, which other women didn't do, and just by sticking around, it kind of they form a weird relationship. They make this Brooks out to be like a little bit better of a monster than it probably needs to be, because they wanted to give Ciri that like reason to doubt Geralt. I think is sort of what the Brooks's role is to like.
Also, it sounds like that Siri wasn't in the original storytelling, so adding
Right.
her as an element, she kind of had a little bit of like a rapport with Neville going over the stories with the
Mhm.
projector
Oh, I
land
have to talk
thing.
about that story too before we get too far into it. But
Okay, we'll
um,
get back to that, but yeah, the like just her being there, they kind of needed to have, it sounds like, extra story elements that weren't necessarily there in the first place, and I don't mind
but that's what I
deviations
love though.
from
That's
source
what's so
material.
great about the show, because you
Yep.
need to have this idea that like Geralt killing monsters, is it good? Is he bad for killing monsters? Does he really think about the morality of it? And Ciri kind of needs to experience that and see that. So they chose an adventure that they could incorporate that into, and one that's interesting. So that's why I love it. That's why season one, this episode's so good. That's why the
I
show is
never
so good.
I never made the correlation, but that's very much a lot of the supernatural episodes.
Oh
they're
yeah,
Well, I
they're
just want to
also
make like a
that.
quick add-on actually to what Coach is talking about. Like definitely like the Bruxa is very much like the part of the vampire-esque kind of mythology, but I want like my first reaction was a Bruxa, not knowing, like the actual mythology behind it, but I was like, "Oh, it's a harpy." Because they
It
see
does
the
look a
town
little
and
like
they were
a
like
harpy.
who would do such a thing, blah blah blah. But I'm like, wait, harpies aren't necessarily like bloodthirsty creatures. But the interesting thing about a harpy is that the mythology behind it, the main trope of it is they are these kind of demonic creatures that are deployed by God or whatever their leader is, like the devil or whatever, to uh, to make sure that whoever they're basically ordained to see over, uh, bring them to hell or make sure that the punishment is carried out. So that's interesting that the Bruxa was kind of like harpy vampire esque because that's what Nevlin was. He was in this eternal hell, and the Bruxa harpy vampire character merges a lot of different things, like keeping him in that hell. Um, Also with the internal, kind of complexity of their relationship. So
this
Yeah,
episode's so
100%
good.
agree. That was a fun. I love that having you guys on here because this is
yeah,
super
I
fun
just
for
thought it
me.
was cool
This
angle.
episode is so good. This episode
Hmm.
is next level. And I could talk forever about the Brooks's relationship and kind of her weird love versus not love, and the idea that
Hmm.
like the curse doesn't get broken the way a Disney curse would get broken, right? You don't need true love's first kiss. You need
You
to
love his
murder your
blood.
true love.
Yeah, that was a lot.
That's that, but that's the kind of curse you deserve when you do stupid shit,
Yeah,
like
Hmm.
rape people.
exactly.
So
Yeah, definitely
yeah,
not a good
that's
thing to do. So
it
you
definitely.
deserve to get all that bad things happen to you.
I love that intensity of it. I did want to
Hmm.
go back and just hit on that
I was
story.
just gonna ask you about it. Go for it.
I won't make you guys. I won't tell you what it is again, because I'll make you go back and listen to it again. But just know that story is definitely about somebody we know, and it is an important aspect
You talking like the
what they
white
are.
flame? Is that
Wait, the
the what?
story of
The
the one that
story that
he
The
he
lamp.
tells
he like
Siri,
shows,
the lamp.
yeah, with the
Hmm.
lanterns.
Hmm. Yep,
Yes,
yep. I know what you're saying. Yep.
it's a good one. So if you
Hmm.
want to go back and just kind of watch that one part and just be like, I wonder who this could be about. It's about someone, and
Yep.
it is a key figure. Very cool.
It's
Hmm.
Good
Yaskier,
stuff.
right? It's the bard. It's the bard's whole
Yaskier.
tale.
Dan, did they call him
We haven't seen.
Dandelion at all in season one? I don't think they
I
did.
don't remember.
No, no.
He
But
hasn't made his return yet,
think
right?
I think they kind of
Um,
make references to it in like
to him being
nonverbal ways. Yeah.
him being Dandelion. Yeah, I love it.
Hmm.
All right,
Hmm.
I
that's all I
hope
gotta
he comes
say.
back. Yeah, no, that story. I'm actually super interested to know the whole story behind that. But
Yeah,
that's kind of what I had to
it's
say.
good.
That's the beginning of this story. So we progress, and Geralt kind of gets uneasy about being around his friend because of the magic knives and throwing them at his dad and that whole fun interaction there. So this mistrust is this kind of something we're used to seeing from Geralt.
He trusts no one. I mean, that's part of being a Witcher, right? You gotta like always be ready, otherwise you're just gonna get put down. You don't want to die too soon. And being what you are in a world of monsters, what I do find interesting is I don't remember that his medallion ever goes off, which is interesting because there was a monster around.
That's what I kept saying that too. Yep.
But I don't remember if there's a reason behind that. It might have been the guy's magic, might have been preventing it, so that way she didn't get caught.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is interesting, and like he's solving the mystery in classic Geralt fashion. As he solves the mystery, he just like leaves Ciri alone. She could have just been murdered.
Yep.
He's kind of the worst at that, but that's okay.
He's a new father. Okay, we got to give him a little bit of a break. Although I know Cody's also a new father, so you probably don't leave your daughter.
I've never
in the
once
car.
left my daughter alone with a vampire. Not even one time.
Yeah, man, father of the year right there. Yeah,
that's what I'm shooting for. Yeah, the hunt's interesting, and the fight with the Bruxa is interesting. She gets to do, but what's really interesting is that she does the whole weird horror things, the crawling on the walls and the
that was
that was wild. That was wild. I love that.
A weird, like almost backwards sounding voice effect. I don't know what was going on there. That was weird too. It made the Bruxas more interesting as a monster to me anyway while watching it. But obviously, this leads to the conclusion we kind of already touched on it. The high priestess was raped by this guy, and he had to kill his love to break the curse.
Yeah, what's interesting is that the show decided to make like the mystery and the last thing we learn, being how he got cursed, which is not necessarily the normal order of it. So I found that interesting that they decided that was like the most important thing to see last, and maybe that's because they wanted us to like him a little bit first.
It worked. I was a big fan of his until I found that out.
Well, I don't know if they wanted us to like him first because, like again, one of the other tropes throughout the whole Witcher season 1 is that, what is evil and how evil is evil. Greater, lesser, middling. And humans seemingly seem to be the like epitome of what evil is on the continent. Like they are hypocritical, they are indecisive, they are impulsive and whimsical, and they make split decisions, and they're the ones that killed the elves and are trying to eradicate the way of life on the continent and things like that. So I think that us getting to like Nevelyn was, again, like we didn't know about how we knew he did a bad thing, but we didn't know to the extent.
Right.
And yeah, I think it just emphasizes like the humanness and the monster concept, the human monster trope. So
they also must have just kind of leaned into him obviously being their version of the Beast. And they're like, oh, people love the Beast. They love Beauty and the Beast. We might as well just make this guy fun. All we needed was Ewan McGregor to come play a chandelier and we would have been cruising.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of wraps up that story, though. Did you guys have any more notes kind of on Geralt's story? Because I do want to touch on Yennefer briefly. Her story wasn't super developed in this first episode, but anything else you guys want to touch on with Geralt, Ciri, Nevelyn, this whole house thing, the death of the Bruxa?
No, I thought it was
great. I mean, I would love to just add one more thing. I think that, again, with Nevelyn and us have like getting this camaraderie with him kind of sense, I guess is like a way to say it. Ciri, when she's getting to know Nevelyn, he's a gentleman to her. He, he's doing all these very like polite things with her. He's conversing with her. He reminds her probably of oh dear God, I'm forgetting his name. Her mage in Centra from Skellig. Mousik, yeah. She even says it, right? Like, you remind me of an old friend. And, then her and Nevelyn, before he says goodnight, like, they have the conversation where it's, basically like, I don't think you're a bad person. He's like, well, you don't know what I've done. And she's like, well, I don't think that's what makes you a monster. And I think we're thinking like, oh, what did Nevelyn do? But when we take a step back, I think that was really Ciri trying to kind of absolve herself back from what she did in season 1, which is, kill the horse and the other 4 or 5 men in the marsh when they were basically about to rape her. Like, that's the inference, right? I think that's a consensus. Like, they were about to sexually assault her and she killed them. And, once you go down that path, you take a life, like, it's hard to erase, even if you just take one life. But I think that that's kind of like the other thing that I noticed was just her coming to grips with a more adult world, losing her innocence, and becoming more mature and pragmatic with the reality of things, and learning that through her experience with Nevelyn and the Brooksa. It's a good story.
I did want to mention just to people who are watch the show and you might be upset, like, oh, that's not how Nevelyn did it in the books. That wasn't his crime. And or if you're a fan of the game, you're like, oh, blah, blah. I think it's cool because, like I said, in the books, that's not his crime. Because I don't actually remember what it is. But if you play The Witcher 3, there is a side mission where you have to like decide to kill a werewolf or not kill a werewolf. You can, it's, you know, and it's immortal and always comes back to life. Its crime was that it had raped the priestess of this village. So it's cool that they took an element of the game, but they applied it to a different story. And the show does that a lot. I know some people are going to hate that. Like, just do what they did in the book, or just do what they did in the game. Well, it's a show. You only have so much time. So try.
I was just going to say that there's only so much you can really cover on 8-episode, 1 hour an episode show.
But if you look at it in a vacuum, it was a well executed episode. So shut up and be happy.
Yeah. All right. Well, we might as well just talk about Yennefer, one of the other main three.
Yes.
Her storyline didn't do a whole lot in this first episode, but what did we think about her?
Yeah, I think it's a bummer. It's only a bummer because she's so great in season 1.
Right.
And I think the show wants us to feel this like, oh God, I can't wait for her to get back to being herself. Because we want her to be what she was in season 1. But it's a bummer that she's not. Like I said, she's kind of just being captured, and that's kind of all we get to see. But it's a bummer setup, but that's the point.
Yeah, similar to like a Jaime Lannister, where he's built up to be this just ultimate soldier guy, and then all of a sudden you clip his wings, and now he's a prisoner. It's like, okay, well, now his storyline's going nowhere. It's kind of what Yennefer's did, but they did manage to do something with it. Go ahead, Rachel.
No, I was just gonna say I have to disagree. Like, I loved episode 2 and everything that happened.
We're not there yet.
I was still thinking of episode 1. To be fair.
We're still in episode 1.
Yeah, because we didn't talk about Yennefer at all in the first one, which it was almost not worth mentioning.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought we were already moving on to that. Okay,
we're going to episode 2. Don't worry about that.
You're right. Okay, on that note, then yes, I agree. We really didn't see that much of her on episode 1, but I think the things that we did see really set us up for episode 2. So
yes,
I'll just say that. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Was it episode 1 that they revealed they were having similar dreams or something like that, or was that the beginning of 2?
Beginning of 2.
Okay, well,
like you said, episode 1 does the Tisea thing and everything, and that's the point. It's like, how much do other people love Yennefer?
Right.
So we know why it's so sad.
We might as well just take that very good transition of us being confused on which one's which and talk about episode 2.
Perfect. I love episode 3. Let's talk about it.
We're not doing episode 3 today. I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it yet either. Hold on.
Episode 2.
Yep. So episode 2, it's a very self-contained story. I felt as far as Geralt and Ciri are concerned, very few sets, and kind of just one of those things where it was primarily focused on some characters. Go ahead, Coach.
I effing love the way Kaer Morhen looks.
It does look really cool.
So good. It is almost to scale exactly what it looks like in the Witcher 3 game. Like
it's
like all the little details, like where the wood's piled up and everything. It's like exactly like the game. It's so good. Oh, it looks so good.
I know you guys can't see me. I'm nodding my head so hard right now. I'm like, yes, exactly. That was my immediate. I was like shouting that out loud. I was like, oh my God, this is they had the scale, they had everything, the little details down. It was really awesome to see that from the game. So
dope. I'm glad you guys are enjoying the set. I have the
You
Witcher
do.
3. I have not beaten it yet. I started it and then I got some other games. So I'm honestly, when I finish season 2 of the show, I'm gonna throw that game back
to Kaer Morhen then. So you get the reference.
Yeah. Okay. I will get there. But what did we think of this episode, Cody? You talked about in our season 1 overview that you really, really were excited to see the other Witchers in the home. So did this episode kind of live up to that hype?
Yeah, it did. It does a lot of things that are really cool. Like I said, the look of the castle itself is perfect to the game. It's perfect to the idea of like this was a castle once and now it's kind of been destroyed and there's only so many people. so you can't really upkeep it, and it shows a lot of that stuff. What people aren't gonna like is that the individual other Witchers besides Vesemir and Geralt are sort of amalgamations of other ones. They're not going to be direct translations to other references, so it'll annoy certain people. But that's not how he acted in the book. Well, that's not what the show's going for. The show needs certain characters to be certain things for this version of Ciri and Geralt. So it'll annoy people that they're not quite the same. They don't have the same charisma, but I like them enough. The Witchers we did see, I like. I like the addition of the tree. That's new to the show that didn't exist in any other medium. Like the tree that like hung the old medallions.
The Witcher medallions. That was cool. I assumed that was from the game, so that's pretty neat that it's just an addition from for the show.
But yeah, everything about Kaer Morhen itself is very cool. The Witchers are very cool. If you guys haven't seen, there's an anime prequel to this show that explains Vesemir. Might be worth checking out sometime.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna reference to. I think they also made a really great reference to Nightmare of the Wolf, the anime that came out. Yeah, fantastic. They talked about, well, hopefully, I don't know if we should get into it, like naming names, but they made a reference to a previous Witcher, Declan, who, is part of the Witcher legacy. And I thought that, weaving that story in with Vesemir explaining that to Ciri, if anybody hasn't watched Nightmare of the Wolf, they should go watch it so that they understand that reference, and it paints a really cool picture of another side of Kaer Morhen. So
I genuinely doing this podcast. Part of the reason was because I'm not so high on my knowledge of this stuff. So learning this stuff from you guys, and then I get to go back and kind of go through all of the back catalog of information. I'm excited to do. But since you brought him up, we might as well talk about Vesemir. Do we like the live action kind of translation here? Was he dope? Was he kind of a letdown in how you know the character?
Yeah, that's a super good question. He's a little different. He's a little less scruff. A little, it's hard to say because his translation in the game, he loves Ciri so much. So you kind of, I don't know. I like it enough. It's just he's so perfect in the game itself that it's it's hard to be that same character. But that's not this actor's fault or this show's fault. Because I think he's going to have a good storyline. And he seems to really care about the Witchers themselves, so I like it.
Well, like you said, we got to introduce some other Witchers. Actually, you know what, Rachel, did you have any other notes on Vesemir?
Oh no, I mean I agree. I think that what they had written out for him for episode 2, it got the job done. I think it conveyed the central theme of who Vesemir is at this point in time, and I'm excited to see more of him.
I agree. He seems like he's going to be a fun character. We can jump into the other Witchers now. One was called like Lamb Chop or something like that. There were a few that just got random names, but Eskel was the main kind of, I don't know, seemed like a Judas type character where he immediately kind of went for Ciri in a way, and he brought in the bio warfare of the Lychee or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. He's interesting. There's been other Witchers from the other source material that's has the whole charismatic but too cool for school. Like, I'm just doing all this to distract myself from how much life sucks as a Witcher, which is always in such contrast to what Geralt is, who's just like, yeah, life sucks, but that's fine. That's the life we live. So it's always good to have the contrast, and Geralt always trying to be the big brother who's like not letting that go down was interesting. The party was like interesting enough.
Yeah, their little fight was kind of fun to watch. I was like, okay, so Geralt could definitely best this guy, even though he's also a Witcher. So it kind of just establishes his dominance a little bit more, which is always good to see from our titular character. But this monster, the Lychee, I mean, we don't get to see the original. We get to see the arm, obviously, which is getting analyzed in the lab and all that good stuff. But, of course, Eskel is infected. So we get to see the visual representation. Was this monster in any other source material? Is this a newer one? What's going on with that?
Leshies are. This version is not. They don't ever. There's not like this whole idea that it infects things and they grow into them is unique. but I won't say any more because they might talk about it in later episodes. So, but it looks cool. It looked a
Do you
little
think-
CGI-ish, but
Do you think that it kind of begs the question whether it is a Leakshi or not? If it's something that maybe is a more ancient form of Leakshi, or maybe it's like something similar, but it's not like it. Like it's an imitation form, or maybe it was like an incantation or something, like some sort of different entity, maybe.
now that I know the answer, I will not answer this.
Okay.
well,
Oh yeah.
I can only speculate, but I'm kind of the opinion that if it doesn't act like the original, there's probably a variant of some sort on it. I don't know if it's an entirely new creature or this is I think in season 1 during the coronation type ceremony, those two guys are talking about the monster that they took down, and they were describing the physical attributes, and Geralt obviously corrected them and knew they were lying. But then he said, "Oh, but I guess maybe," just kind of giving them
The
benefit of the doubt.
yeah, conversation. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that one. So I think that was an example of him just maybe accepting that it could be the case. But I think in this season, maybe they're bringing that back a little, and that's actually what's the case is, where it's
That's a good point, Josh. Yeah.
Geralt's not known to be wrong very often. Would be kind of how I felt about it when I watched it. I was like, yeah, if Geralt thinks something's weird going on, Geralt's probably right. He seems to, like you said, like from season 1, that he knows just about everything about every monster that's ever been.
Right.
He has a good understanding. They even make fun of Eskill, like, why didn't you just do this? I mean, obviously a flaming sword to the heart is...
It's a flame through the heart. That's all it takes, man. Are you dumb?
Your dumb face.
So, I think that about wraps up anything to do with the Witchers. Did we want to touch on anything else? I mean, Ciri's little adventure where she kind of she rebels a bit. I guess that's an important thing to note, that she's not just going to listen to the Witcher's, I don't know, you want to call them commands or whatever you want to say. He's taking on that parental figure, and she's choosing to rebel to kind of advance her character a bit.
But she does listen when it mattered. She trusted him on the big thing at the end. So it goes to show, and this is, I think, the most interesting, and I literally just read an article about an hour before we jumped on by Henry Cavill about his arc. And he wanted to be really intentional with this idea that if he's going to be this parental figure, he wants to be one of respect and not of like, just listen to me because you're supposed to listen to me. And this episode does a pretty good job of it in this idea that like when she rebelled the first time, he kind of get it and he understood and he listened so he didn't just like get mad and like just bark back. Oh, just trust me, Batman style, So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was good for Ciri to both show that she can rebel, but also like that she trusts Geralt. So if she's gonna not listen to Geralt, it's probably gonna be a good reason for it. So I like this setup.
Rachel, what do you think about Ciri in this episode?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting that you guys use the word rebel, and I'm sure that probably many other people do, but maybe I'll say something. It's maybe a little bit more in defense of Ciri's behavior. Is that?
Oh, I'm not saying it was indefensible. I'm just saying
that's
the way to phrase it. No, she can feel free to do what she wants. She's a strong, independent young woman. Good for her.
Yeah, no. I that's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, I think that people who don't necessarily maybe agree with Geralt's quote parenting style, right? They would see Ciri's and obviously in real life, like people see that kind of behavior as, the young individual is rebelling against, what they're being told to do or the structure of society or whatever. But I think that Ciri grew up in obviously a very like curated environment. She was very protected. And then she was literally thrown out into this big wide world of chaos. And, she's really been having to figure out her way, her resolve throughout season 1, everything that she went through. And I think she's really demonstrating in the second episode her growth and her independence, which I think is really important because she's obviously got so much power in her, and we're going to have to see kind of, the balance between her dark and light side, like how she's going to be managing that and Geralt's guidance and Vesemir's guidance play into that. But I think it's really cool that we get to see kind of her decision-making process along the way.
Yeah.
So,
And if you're gonna if you're gonna have a guide to how to be an adult, The Witcher might be he's got some experience. So I'm glad that
mhm.
he's around for the ride as well. So I think that's gonna wrap it up on their storyline. I think the only thing left to say on episode 2, let's talk about Yennefer's story. The story Rachel was
Yes.
so excited to
Yes.
talk about. So you
Yeah.
feel free to jump in and go first.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have to say that I love the fact that we're seeing more of Fringilla with Yennefer. I'm glad that Fringilla is not being like positioned as a side character. She's really been brought to the forefront as a main character, and their dialogue was so unique. You never really see that in film. You never see women like you see women doing tit for tat dialogue, but it's always very catty, right? It's always very like, oh, it's just drama, it's nonsense. It doesn't really, like they're just talking shit, right? And it's not going to get anywhere. But I thought it was really poignant what they had to say because they were so spitfire at each other that they were almost basically not two sides of one coin, but kind of like that, right? Like they're mirroring each other. Like
Right.
Fringilla pursued her path in life because of faith, and Yennefer pursued her path in life because of power. And that's just a really interesting contrast how they're both so devout in what they pursued in their life and how they come at different angles to kind of this resolve that they both pursue life at. I just thought that, like their initial conversation that they had, and then, towards the end, kind of just like spitting back and forth at each other. I think it's really key.
Yeah, those two characters are definitely interesting. I think you kind of have to have an additional character as opposed to just Yennefer being the prisoner. You have to have someone to kind of bounce things off of, and Fringilla is really that perfect character that she also is a good character in her own right, and the two of them together is a fun. I don't know if I want to call them a side story, but I guess technically if The Witcher is the main story, they would be the side story. And I'm excited to see more because we finally get some like action with these new characters. Like I said earlier in the episode, they get this weird where they all have a dream about a person in a robe, and
Hmm.
then it
Oh, this is
seems to be
super
the same
important.
dream, the three color robes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you guys want to talk about that for a second. What you got there, Coach?
I don't remember. Does this episode? Do they go anywhere and discuss
Yes.
this?
So they
They
go to the shrine that
Okay,
turns into a
making sure.
tomb.
Yeah,
Yes.
Ithilien. Yep,
Gotcha.
Ithilien.
I
Mhm.
just didn't want to. I didn't want to get way too. I didn't want to like talk about what happened. I was misquoting which episode. Yeah, I like the addition of the mage elf. I think she's interesting. I think that is
Mhm.
going to lends itself to an interesting political dynamic that's not often hit on in the other mediums. This idea that like the elves are their own force and their own power. They'll say. Because I don't super care about the war of Nilfgaard versus the North a ton. Because it's fine. It is what it is. Like all things, it seems like both sides are kind of the bad guys at the same time, which is super fun. But the elves give it an interesting little dynamic of like who's going to treat them better. Might end up being more key. So I like her addition. Fringilla's fine. You guys like her more than I do. But I love Yennefer. The whole three rope thing is cool. The
The
idea.
transforming into those other weird characters. What was that all about? Really, that was
Ooh,
trippy to say the least.
I love it. I don't know if you guys picked up on it, but it's like very similar to some of the references made in Game of Thrones and obviously other like Norse Viking mythology, but the crone, maiden, and warrior concept,
Oh,
Yeah.
like those kind of like. Sorry, Coach, go ahead.
No. I was thinking the same thing. I was
Yeah.
curious if they were trying to do, if they were mimicking the three witches from Witcher 3, like if they were doing the crones from the village, or if they're going to save them for later. That's what I'm most fascinated by. So, fans of the game, I don't have an answer for you. I don't know if that's their version of the three witches. Even though
Yeah,
it's
my question too.
literally the same thing. But if you did notice, she referenced earlier when Vesemir was having that conversation and brought up, this and that. He directly discusses that they one time had put a demon, the last of its kind, and they locked it away in the middle of the woods.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's obviously the same
Thing to
figure
go for here.
that the
Yes.
girls ran
Yes.
into.
Okay,
So.
so that kind of explains just the acid trip hallucination that happened in that tomb where everything's going crazy and the house is floating, and then you got to turn your back to the forest and face the house and all that stuff. That was a lot of visual vomit, not in a bad way because it looked cool, but it was just a lot of visual effects.
I love the idea of it being a demon.
That's cool.
a bit, bringing a very powerful force that like is a threat to something like mages. And doing it in the way that all demons do, which is, hey, tit for tat. I can help you, you help me, kind of thing. So it's interesting. They all got presented with their wish.
Yeah. Well, I think that about covers it, unless I'm forgetting something else out of these first 2 episodes. I really enjoyed this podcast. Any final thoughts on these 2? We will be doing 2 more on Thursday. Rachel, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I would really love to see. Obviously, we have the human monster trope. We have the central strong female trope. We've got parental love. Moving forward, we're not going to talk about that, but other characters are involved in a more parental love concept. We have to say in Geralt right now that we're aware of, and then just like internal love, you can see that Yennefer is struggling with that, with her significantly diminished lost power at the end of episode 2. So seeing kind of this love concept would be really interesting moving forward.
Yeah, I wanted to hit on this idea that when Geralt does what he has to do to stop Eskir as Aleski, and it weighs on the Witchers, and it's like you see how important every Witcher is because there's so little of them, and they can no longer reproduce, which you learn about you'd have to watch the prequel to kind of realize why. But no more Witchers can be made, so that means every Witcher is sort of even more important. So that's, I think, going to play big. And also, the rest of the show is so good. Just keep watching. It just keeps getting better. I love it. It sucks you in.
Yep. I'm going to keep it 2 at a time. Rachel, you feel free to watch the rest of the show.
I'll be right in between y'all.
I appreciate both of you joining me on this podcast. It was super fun. And that's all I got to say here. Final thoughts, either one of you. Good things to talk about.
No, this was super fun. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. I would like to talk other nerd stuff, but hope you guys join us on our Marvel stuff because that's what we're about to do. So,
yep. And the tease I got is we are doing Spider Week this week on the Marvel Stuff podcast. We are doing 5 podcasts in a week. I affectionately call this the podcalypse for me because I'm going to be shooting 4 today and editing 7. There are going to be 7 podcasts this week. So if you want to hear me talk, go ahead and do that. Follow us on the Marvel Stuff podcast. Catch us on live on Facebook. And you guys have a good one.